He lost once, to a man he called brother. Then he disappeared for a decade. When he returned, no army, no empire, no king could stop him for the next 40 years. But there was one problem he spent his entire life running from and never solved. He tore down every existing system built on blood, and blood is exactly what tore him apart. But there was one problem he spent his entire life running from and never solved. He tore down every existing system built on blood, and blood is exactly what tore him apart. Two men, same step, same hunger, same oath, completely opposing conclusions. To understand why that matters, you need to understand what the steppe made them. Born around 1162, his name was Temujin. The steppe ran on one thing: blood. Who you were born to determined everything. The aristocrats owned the order. Everyone else served it. His father was poisoned when he was 9. His tribe walked away. Not defeated, not conquered, abandoned. The old order had taught him exactly what it did to people it didn't need. He never forgot the lesson. At 20, enslaved by his father's own allies, he escaped with nothing and built everything on one idea: a man's worth is what he can do. Not his blood, not his father's name, his execution, his loyalty, his lethality. On a steppe built entirely on birthright, that idea was a threat. Jamuka knew it. His Anda, his blood brother. Sacred oath above all others. Same hunger, same intelligence, same read of the steppe. But Jamuka was the old order's champion. Rank had to come from blood, or it meant nothing. Two men, one steppe. And the steppe wasn't big enough for both of them. 1186. Temujin was elected Khan of the Mongols, not by birth, by the men who had chosen to follow him. Jamuka saw it immediately for what it was, not just a rival, a verdict. If Temujin's way was right, if a man with no blood claim could be elected Khan, then everything Jamuka stood for was already losing. 1187. He attacked with 30,000 men. Temujin lost. Then Jamuka did something that would cost him everything. He took 70 of Temujin's captured commanders and boiled them alive in iron cauldrons. He won the battle by being exactly what the old order produced at its worst, and the steppe watched. Jamuka's own followers started drifting toward the man who had just lost. Not because Temujin had beaten him, because Temujin's people didn't end up in cauldrons. Temujin vanished, a decade of silence. He came back with 19 men, different tribes, different religions. One promise: share the bitter and I'll share the sweet. Not blood, not birthright, merit. If that's the kind of history you want, subscribe. This is what we do here. 3 years later, he owned the steppe. Clan by clan, the old order fractured. Not because Temujin defeated them, because his way worked and theirs didn't. But while every clan on the steppe was choosing his side, his own tent had already been compromised at home. His wife Berta had been kidnapped by the Merkits. It took him 9 months to raise an army, hunt them down, and get her back. She came back already pregnant. Temujin claimed the child as his own and named him Jochi. In Mongolian, Jochi means the guest. He never spoke of it again. And yet of all his sons, Jochi was the one he trusted most. 9,000 warriors, his own territory, his father's right hand. The question was never whether Genghis wanted him. It was whether the empire would accept him. The guest was in the tent, and everyone on the steppe knew it. 1206. The steppe is his. Every tribe, every clan, every man who followed the old order unified under one banner. The steppe gives him a new name, Genghis Khan. Jamuka is brought before him in chains. Genghis offers mercy, his old place at his side. Jamuka refuses, asks instead for a noble death. Back broken, not a drop of blood on the soil, because the steppe believed royal blood touching the earth triggered an eternal curse. Genghis grants it, his blood brother, his oldest rival, his mirror, gone. Even his mercy had to play by the old world's rules. He stood over the body of the last man who had ever beaten him, the only man who had ever truly known him, and buried the only defeat with him. Then he turned east, the Jin Dynasty, 60 million people. He didn't bring a bigger army. He brought a better idea. The Ongud, frontier guards who hated their Jin overlords, opened the gates from inside. He didn't fight the wall, he made it irrelevant. When the Jin gave chase, his general Jebe ran. Abandoned horses, weapons, supplies. The Jin thought they were winning. They followed a ghost into open ground and were destroyed. Then west. 200,000 men, 3 columns, 3 directions, simultaneous. The Shah of Khwarezm had 1 defense. Genghis gave him 3 to worry about at once. Bukhara, gone. Samarkand, gone. Urgench, gone. He didn't just win battles. He made his enemies defeat themselves. Every empire he faced, he broke. There was only one he couldn't. But a machine built purely for expansion cannot function in a static room. Here is the question nobody asks at the peak of an empire. What does it do when there is nothing left to conquer, and the only question remaining is who inherits it? Genghis Khan had no answer, because the answer required him to look at the guest inside his own tent. On the eve of the Western campaign, a secondary wife named Yesui asked him the question he had been running from. If you don't come back, who rules? The room went cold. To answer, he had to call a Kurultai, a formal gathering of the entire Mongol court, to decide succession. The conversation he had successfully avoided for 20 years was suddenly cornering him. He had 4 sons by birth. Yochi, the eldest, his most trusted, 9,000 warriors under his command. His father's right hand on the Western campaigns. Chagatai, the second, the enforcer of his own legal code, fanatical, uncompromising. The man Genghis had trusted to uphold everything he built. Ogedei, the third, generous, well-liked, but rarely sober. Tolui, the youngest, unquestionably the finest general of the 4, said nothing. By merit, it should have been Yochi. Genghis had already shown who he trusted most. Yochi stepped forward. Chagatai had been waiting for exactly that. Stood up, pointed at his brother, and said 3 words. "You Murkit bastard!" in front of the entire imperial court. A fistfight erupted inside the royal tent. The man who executed kings without letting their blood touch the earth could not stop his own sons drawing it. This is where it detonates. He simply cannot apply it. Pick the most capable, the most loyal, the most lethal. Because doing that forces him to publicly answer the question he buried in silence 2 decades ago. Is Yochi his? If he picks Jochi, the empire splits along that question immediately. Chagatai's faction burns everything down. If he punishes Chagatai, he invalidates the very law holding his empire together. Jochi and Chagatai had already fractured military command during Khwarezm. Put either of them on the throne, and the other lights the match. Genghis came to see Chagatai for what he was: uncompromising, arrogant, narrow-minded. A man who knew the law perfectly and missed the point of it entirely. So both were gone, which left Tolui, the finest general, the traditional heir by Mongol custom. But Tolui's wife welcomed every religion on the steppe, The conservative Mongol court didn't trust a Khan whose house looked that foreign. So it was Ögedei, not the best man, not the safest pair of hands, the most politically acceptable man, generous enough to be liked, pliable enough to be managed. Known across the empire for one thing above all others, his love of drink. He built a world on the principle that the right man always rises. In his own house, he couldn't find him. He thought picking Ögedei ended the conversation. It didn't. Because Jochi was still alive. And Genghis Khan was still avoiding the only question that mattered. 1226. Jochi refuses his father's summons, claims he is too sick to travel. A traveler tells Genghis Khan otherwise, that he is out hunting. Enraged, Genghis Khan prepares an army to march west. Before he arrives, Jochi is dead. February 1227, 6 months before his father. Did Genghis order it? Did the incoming army finish what the illness started? History refuses to say. The son he trusted most, the question he never answered, both gone before he was. August 1227, Genghis Khan dies on campaign. He falls from his horse. The injuries are severe. He presses on anyway. He was buried in secret, unmarked grave. Till this day, people are still searching for the exact location. The man who believed spilled blood cursed the earth returned his own blood to it in total silence. The empire fractures almost immediately, exactly as he feared it would. 1241. Ögedei drinks himself to death. The succession collapses into a generation of civil war. It takes 3 generations for one man to claw it back together. His grandson, the one you may know from the Marco Polo series, Kublai Khan. But before we get there, this is where it was written. Not in Beijing, not on a throne. In a tent on the steppe, the night a secondary wife asked a simple question, and the conqueror had no answer. He tore down every world built on blood, and blood is exactly what tore him apart. Kublai Khan paid the full price of that answer. That story is next.